I think the wheel of fate began to spin. When Miyazaki went to the US for Little Nemo, Hollywood recognized his talent. Actually, Miyazaki had no plan to direct the Castle of Cagliostro. He said he had done everything in the first season of the TV series. Rather than that, the production of Little Nemo was a collaboration with Hollywood with a budget of $24,400,000. George Lucas was the producer and Ray Douglas Bradbury wrote the script. It was an incredible film. Miyazaki was supposed to direct it. This was planned by the evil producer Fujioka, as I mentioned earlier. When Pippi Longstocking was rejected by the author, he was already on to the next piece. His next plan was to go to Hollywood and succeed. He thought making an anime in Japan and winning a high viewing rate neither makes us acknowledged nor rich. That's wrong. So he headed to Hollywood. Look at Disney. They are successful. Osamu Tezuka, Tatsunoko Production, and Kodansha, who made Akira, all thought the same. They all wanted to go to Hollywood and make the world acknowledge Japanese anime. But when we look at history, the only guy who really went to Hollywood, rented a luxury house and lived there, interacted with the American staff for years, and actually produced an anime film was Yutaka Fujioka. That guy with shady eyes in sunglasses. No one else could do that. And the story which he could obtain the right to was Little Nemo. Little Nemo was a weekly newspaper comic strip that was on the Sunday edition of Herald Tribune, which had the headquarters in New York City. It was in color and occupied one whole page. You see the title over here, Little Nemo in Slumberland? So it's about Nemo having a strange dream every episode. In this episode, the boy's bed grows long legs and walks out of the room. The legs get longer and longer over the buildings, but as the legs get entangled, the boy drops and wakes up from the dream. It was simple as that, but it was extremely popular back then. It was actually considered to be the most popular piece in the history of American comics. Every episode's complete in a page, and every ending was Nemo falling from the bed to wake up from his dream. But the stories varied so much. It was so popular to the point that if someone made an anime out of it, Mickey Mouse couldn't have beaten its sales. What Fujioka accomplished during this time was really incredible. Why I say incredible is because he didn't only obtain the right to make the anime version of Nemo, he also hired the members of Disney's 9 Old Men, who had made Fantasia and Snow White. 9 Old Men sounds to me like the 7 dwarves from Snow White. Anyway, Fujioka succeeded in having Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston join the project as technical staff. Next, he got George Lucas as the producer and Ray Bradbury as the screenplay writer. Finally, he won a contract with a sponsor from the Japanese side. That famous loan shark company, Acom. Acom became like a faucet where money comes out without limit. The production team consisted of both Japanese and American staff. The American technical staff, like 9 Old Men, were summoned to teach the Japanese staff animation, and those were Miyazaki, Takahata, and Yoshifumi Kondo. Fujioka took the incredible team of Japanese staff to Hollywood and had 9 Old Men give them lessons. It hardly sounded true. What Fujioka did to have the American creators recognize Takahata and Miyazaki's talent was to make a subtitled version of The Castle of Cagliostro, which had just completed, and Chia the Brat that Takahata had directed. Fujioka held screenings in the US to promote these animes to the American staff, celebrities, movie makers, or TV producers who were interested in animation. He just showed and showed and showed. He held crazy amounts of screenings. And people were truly astonished when they saw the films. 9 Old Men watched Cagliostro and said, it was so well made that they doubted if there was anything they could teach its creators. Steven Spielberg also accidentally watched Cagliostro and later commented, "I never shoot car chases because I can never beat the ones in Cagliostro." It's all thanks to Fujioka's screenings, about which he didn't discriminate who to show. Even John Lasseter, who later made Pixar and became a master movie director, watched it too. He wanted to join Disney to make animation, but after he was dragged into one of the screenings, he decided to become Miyazaki's apprentice. So, the total budget of $24,400,000 was said to all come from ACOM. But if the money was properly sent and all the staff members were able to work efficiently. Miyazaki's official film in the 1980s after the Castle of Cagliostro was gonna be Little Nemo. Miyazaki won an Academy Award for an animated feature many years later, but if he directed Little Nemo, he probably would have been able to prove his talent in Hollywood 20 years before that. But unfortunately, the production of Little Nemo strayed from the predicted course and couldn't get back on track. It ended up taking 10 years to complete. Meanwhile, most of the gorgeous primary members left the project, and the budget, which seemed like an infinite amount, was used up, including an extra $4,400,000 ACOM later added. They barely had enough to advertise. The production ended with such little money, so even though they screened all throughout the US, the sales did so poorly, and accordingly, they only made about $2 million. So it was a complete failure. Later, it won some awards in the US, but just like Cagliostro, it wasn't a commercial success at all. And Fujioka died a broken-hearted man a year before the movie was released. The biggest reason for the failure was that George Lucas left the project first. When Lucas left, he said, "Rather than me getting involved in animation, I know a better man." Then he introduced the producer of Star Wars called Gary Kurtz. It's been said that Kurtz was the reason everything went wrong. Well, at least that's what Otsuka said. Because every decision he made was bad. The budget amount of $28,800,000 didn't just disappear. It was all spent on the endless production. But no matter how much money they spent on storyboards, pilot films, or test shots, Kurtz would reject all of them. But the only reason to do so was just because he didn't like them. Why was he so egoistic though? Well, it was the first time for Kurtz to produce an animation, and his reference was Walt Disney. Walt Disney was also someone who only depended on his creative instinct and said, "This is good" or "This is bad." It's been said Kurtz imitated that style. But Disney was someone who never let his people call him Mr. Disney. All employees of the Walt Disney Company called him by his first name, Walt. And Disney himself also remembered the faces of all of his employees and called them by their first names. Dictatorship works fine in such a relationship. Once they leave the workplace, the employees and the CEO are friends and families. They're equal. But the moment they started working, Disney dictated all creative decisions. It worked because there was a balance. Even so, Disney was embroiled in a labor movement with Pinocchio, which gave him a terrible experience. Kurtz imitated Disney during his golden age. But he and George Lucas were famous misanthropes, so Kurtz didn't have the same balance Disney had. So Kurtz rejected Miyazaki's storyboards one after another. On the other hand, Miyazaki wanted to make Little Nemo his story like he had always done. So he came up with so many ideas and proposed them, which he later used for Princess Mononoke and Nausicaa. But Kurtz rejected them all. Not only that, he didn't explain why. Therefore, Miyazaki was the first one to leave the project. And many people later followed. Gary Kurtz and Fujioka were the only two who were in the team until the end. Kurtz kept on saying no without any reasons, so the staff had to struggle to find solutions without having many clues as to what would be acceptable. But they did finish the film, which is now on video. It's called Little Nemo. You can buy it too, but the best part is the pilot film Kondo and Kazuhide Tomonaga made. It's a short 3-minute clip that you can also watch on YouTube, but it's amazing. I imagine if George Lucas was the producer, not Gary Kurtz, or if Fujioka had more control over the production than he actually did, then Takahata and Miyazaki would have stayed as the directors of the movie. Then I'm sure the cultural power relationships of the world would definitely have changed. Back in the 80s in Japan, YMO in music, Sony in technology, and the later bubble economy contributed to the world trend, which was called Japan is number one. If Miyazaki and Takahata emerged in the world's film industry with images greater than Star Wars, Japan would have topped and ruled the world in terms of culture. This is my delusion. Japan would have topped and ruled the world. Anyway, finally back to the original topic. It's already been an hour. When there was still an infinite amount of budget and time, an animation company called Telecom Animation Film was established just to produce Little Nemo. It was the company that later produced the Castle of Cagliostro. Telecom put an advertisement in a newspaper to recruit young people who had neither made nor watched TV anime before. Out of 1,000 applicants, they picked 42. There's a creator called Sadao Tsukioka who made Wolf Boy Ken all by himself. He was once an employee of Toei Animation when Toei made a TV series called Wolf Boy Ken. He wrote the original story, the storyboard, and he drew all the drawings by himself. He made the first 4 episodes of the series like that. Then he burned out and said, I can't do this anymore. So he finally hired a few staff members. Can you imagine making 4 episodes by himself? A monster. This guy, Sadao Tsukioka, came to Telecom as an educator of those 42 newbies, and it was a complete elite education. First of all, those 42 members had never made anime, or preferably never seen one. They were just good at drawing. Tsukioka gave them a thorough ideological education. He told them, never watch TV animes because they're bad. You will make an amazing animation film from scratch. After he agitated everyone's minds, he said, my job is done, and left. Now, what were left were 42 amateurs who knew nothing about anime but had high self-esteem. Out of the 42, only 5 were men, and the rest were all beautiful women for some reason. So, Telecom went to Otsuka and begged, we've made a production studio to make Little Nemo, but Tsukioka quit. Please help us. So, when Otsuka went to Telecom, he saw these hipsters. Among the 42, some of them were drawing, but for some reason, some were singing. And when Young Man, a famous song by Hideki Saijo, came out from the radio, everyone stood up and started dancing YMCA. I mean, what kind of animation studio was that? Seeing the disaster, Otsuka almost panicked. And feeling desperately in need to teach them proper animation skills, he summoned Atsuko Tanaka. Do you remember the scene? Where Lupin and Jigen steal spaghetti from each other in Cagliostro? Atsuko Tanaka drew that scene. When she drew it, she had just graduated from the animation department of a design school. It was her first year as a professional. But she was extremely skilled, so Otsuka invited her as the teacher. The 42 newbies were rebellious at first. They said, we don't need to be taught, we are the creators. Thanks to the ideological education they had received, they didn't listen. But Otsuka invited the best of the best animators to teach them almost one-on-one. Well, some still quit. But because the students were good draftsmen in the first place, their skills gradually improved within a year. Then, they briefly assisted The Mystery of Mamo, the first feature film of the Lupin series. The main staff of Mamo criticized them, saying, "Oh, telecom animators think highly of themselves, but they suck," which was mortifying for Otsuka. But he patiently improved their skills by holding lessons called anime seminars, which he taught as well. Then, Telecom was selected as the main studio to create the Castle of Cagliostro. Well, Fujioka estimated Little Nemo would require another 2 years to start. That was the main reason why Telecom was chosen. But Miyazaki panicked because he had heard the famous story of how Telecom animators had the worst skills and attitudes. But Otsuka convinced Miyazaki, "I'll take care of them. We have Tanaka and Tomonaga. We are also hiring more veteran creators to educate them." Otsuka gave a thorough elite education to the animators to make Telecom ready for a feature film. So, in reality, Cagliostro was a film used to educate the telecom animators. The real goal of both Fujioka and Otsuka, the executives of Telecom, wasn't to make Cagliostro a hit, but to later make the epic anime film Little Nemo. Therefore, they planned to enhance the skills of the anime staff by allowing them to have the experience of making a whole feature film, which happened to be Cagliostro. But, of course, Miyazaki didn't want his first feature film to be ruined like that. So, he had to somehow use those bad animators and make the film. Miyazaki had already left Little Nemo, so he felt no obligation to allow his own film to become practice material for those amateurs. The only option left was to train them to become proper animators. Meanwhile, he had to be strategic about cutting corners wherever he could, but didn't want to deteriorate the quality even by a single bit. He cut corners as much as possible while perfectly maintaining the quality. Miyazaki's determination and tenacity led to the miraculous opening of the Castle of Cagliostro. Sorry guys, free part ends here. Now, I'm sorry. I wanted to fit the lecture about the opening in the free part, but it'll take another hour. So the questionnaire, please. The second half will cover the perfect opening. It's a story about how the group of amateurs made it. And I'll do Buddha Cagliostro. I have a model, so I'll virtually wander inside the castle. Then I'll talk about the end of Miyazaki's dream, which will answer the question of why Lupin throws away the fake bills. Oh god. Sorry it was long, but if I don't talk about what happened to Telecom and Little Nemo, the lecture about the Castle of Cagliostro would end up incomplete.